General Hospital spoilers tease that Natalia had once been given a gift so few people ever received in the shadowed world of Sonny's dominion: a way out. A clean slate, a new identity. A one-way ticket to Belize where the past would die quietly and the future could begin without fear. It was the kind of chance that most people in her position would have seized without question. The kind of mercy rarely extended by a man known more for finality than forgiveness. But Natalia wasn't most people. And despite everything she had been through, despite the looming danger that clung to her name like a curse, she chose to spit on that mercy and stay. She chose pride. She chose confrontation. And in doing so, she didn't just forfeit her salvation, she invited destruction. To refuse Sonny once is dangerous. To challenge him, publicly and defiantly, is suicidal. Natalia didn't just walk away from the plane. She walked directly into a war zone with her hands empty and her rage burning. She was convinced that Sonny had betrayed her. Convinced that he had promised her more than an escape. In her mind, that ticket to Belize wasn't just an exit plan, it was a pact. A symbol of love, of partnership, of shared rebirth. And when she learned Sonny had never intended to join her, that he had simply been trying to remove a liability from his life with some dignity, Natalia's heartbreak morphed into something far more dangerous. It became obsession. It became war. And now, every step she takes in Port Charles is laced with the scent of rebellion. She didn't just decline safety, she declared her intent to fight. She made it clear she wasn't going quietly, and worse, that she was prepared to take this as far as it needed to go. What had once been private shame now metastasized into public defiance. She began showing up where she wasn't invited. Watching from the sidelines, whispering to people who used to call Sonny an ally. She began leaving voicemails with vague threats, confronting those who had once stood silently beside Sonny, hoping to crack their loyalty with just enough pressure. She thought that by being loud enough, messy enough, disruptive enough, she could force Sonny to bend, either to include her in his world again or to recognize her as someone who couldn't be erased. But what Natalia didn't realize, what she refused to accept, was that Sonny didn't operate on guilt. He didn't negotiate with chaos. And most of all, he didn't tolerate threats. She had rejected his kindness. She had insulted his boundaries. She had crossed the line not once, but repeatedly. And with every move she made, she wasn't regaining power, she was digging a deeper grave. Still, Natalia couldn't see it. Her anger was too consuming, her narrative too fixed. In her mind, she was the wronged woman. Abandoned by a man she believed had made promises, discarded when she became inconvenient. And she would rather burn the world around her than be forgotten by it. But Sonny's world doesn't burn easily. It's built on steel and silence, on calculated alliances and unforgiving retribution. And now, Natalia's erratic behavior was no longer just a personal nuisance, it was becoming a threat to the order he had spent decades constructing. The church was the first true fracture. Daisy's baptism had been meant as a moment of peace, a brief flicker of light in a town that rarely slept without fear. But Natalia turned it into a spectacle, appearing uninvited, unhinged. Seated in the back pew with 1,000 unsaid things trembling on her lips. Everyone saw her. Everyone felt the chill. And when Sonny confronted her, when she exploded with accusations and sorrow and misplaced fury, it was the moment the final line was crossed. She had humiliated him. She had drawn blood in front of the people he loved. And he knew then that her time was running out. What makes the situation more combustible is the control Natalia is trying to wrest from the chaos. She is no longer simply reacting, she's strategizing. Making moves to manipulate perception, gain sympathy, and slowly undermine Sonny's reach. She starts talking to reporters off the record. She leaks parts of conversations she recorded without consent. She tells twisted versions of the truth to people like Sasha, trying to drive a wedge into old alliances. She even approaches Marco again, asking him if he regrets not turning her in, if maybe, just maybe, It's not too late to flip the game and turn Sonny's actions into a legal scandal. The crisis is no longer hypothetical. It's real. It's moving. And it's threatening to undo everything Sonny has tried to preserve. His patience, once monumental, is beginning to fracture. The people around him start to notice it, the shorter silences. The colder tone, the way he's stopped denying what might need to be done. Paul, his enforcer, begins shadowing Natalia's movements more closely. Her phone calls become harder to make. Her routes through town seem to have eyes at every corner. The net is tightening. And deep down, Natalia knows it. But instead of retreating, she doubles down. She calls Nina and leaves a cryptic voicemail. She sends Michael an anonymous email suggesting she has information about recent custody irregularities. She even tries to corner Christina outside a grocery store, hoping to plant seeds of doubt. She's throwing bombs in every direction now, hoping one will land. Hoping one will buy her enough leverage to stay alive. But all she's doing is pushing everyone farther away, and bringing herself closer to the point of no return. Sonny begins weighing options. Belize is no longer on the table. Now the question becomes Pine Barrens or something cleaner. Disappearance or disgrace. He doesn't want to kill her, but she's giving him no choice. The woman he once tried to help is now unraveling his legacy, and in Sonny's world, that's unforgivable. He calls in someone from out of town. Someone who doesn't ask questions and doesn't leave traces. The plan is being laid out in silence, but its execution will be swift. Meanwhile, Marco begins to panic. He hasn't heard from Natalia in hours. Lucas tries to calm him, but something feels wrong. The last time Natalia texted, it was a picture of her passport torn in half. A symbolic gesture, maybe. Or a desperate warning. He goes to the last place she was seen, asks the wrong questions, hears Sonny's name in whispers. And for the first time, Marco realizes the line they've crossed. Natalia wasn't just playing a game. She was walking into a war. And the silence that follows her disappearance may not be one of peace, but of death. This entire chain of events, sparked by one woman's refusal to accept a quiet exit, has become a wildfire. A new crisis is forming, one that could expose old secrets, shatter fragile alliances, and force Sonny to take steps he swore he'd never take again. Everyone around him will feel it. Jocelyn will notice his absence. Jason will question his recent disappearances. Dante will hear rumors that sound too familiar. But none of them will know for certain, because that's how Sonny operates. Quiet. Final. Untraceable. Natalia wanted to control the narrative. But now, she's lost control of her fate. The heat is rising. The city is watching. And in the shadows of Port Charles, another name is being erased in silence. One step at a time. Natalia had the chance to walk away and survive. But she chose to fight. And in Sonny's world, fighting back without power doesn't make you strong, it makes you the next target. And this time, there may be no one left willing to save her. Lucas had always considered himself a man of reason, careful, compassionate, grounded even in chaos. But now, as he stared at the blank screen of his phone for the 100th time, waiting for a message that would never come, he realized how far he had strayed from those principles. The guilt was no longer an echo, it was a deafening scream in his conscience. He had done more than just look away. He had given Sonny the green light. He had encouraged him to take action. To do what had to be done. In that moment, Lucas told himself it was about safety, about protecting Daisy, Christina, Marco, and everyone else tangled in Natalia's path of destruction. But now, with Natalia gone, truly gone, unreachable, untraceable, he could no longer hide behind the illusion of necessity. He hadn't just watched a storm come. He had helped build it. The aftermath was suffocating. With every day that passed without news of Natalia, the silence grew louder. Marco had stopped talking to him entirely. retreating into himself as he searched for answers no one dared say aloud. The last time Lucas saw him, Marco looked like a ghost, clutching a notebook filled with names, dates, and vague sightings that led nowhere. And in every interaction, every glance, Lucas saw the accusation in Marco's eyes, an unspoken truth that Lucas had pushed for the very outcome Marco had always feared. Lucas couldn't sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw Natalia's face, not the wild, paranoid version the town had painted, but the woman he had grown up with, the one who had tried again and again to prove she could be something more. He remembered her tears, her bitterness, her vulnerability. And he remembered how quickly he had dismissed it all as instability. He had told himself she was a threat, that her spiral needed to be stopped. But now, looking back, he realized she hadn't been dangerous. She had been desperate. And she had been alone. What haunted him most wasn't the idea that Sonny had followed through, it was the knowledge that Lucas had known he would. That despite every denial, every careful phrasing, every vague suggestion to handle things, Lucas had understood exactly what that meant in Sonny's world. There were no halfway measures. And now, Natalia was likely dead because of a quiet conversation in which he played the role of moral justification for a man who didn't need permission but took comfort in hearing someone say it anyway. And then came the whispers. Rumors slipping through hospital corridors, coded language spoken in corners of Charlie's, strange glances from people who usually avoided gossip. Some said Natalia was in hiding. Others claimed she had been seen boarding a boat near the edge of the marina. A few swore she'd been spotted in another state, buying groceries under a different name. But Lucas knew better. These were just hopeful delusions, designed to make people feel less complicit. The truth, though not confirmed, was written in the silences, in the gaps of conversation. In Sonny's cold, unreadable expression when her name was mentioned. Worse, something more disturbing began to surface. Natalia had been collecting information. She had kept files, messages, fragments of conversations, voice memos, hidden recordings. She had confided in someone. No one knew how much she had, or where it had been stored. But the implication was clear. She had been preparing for something, an escape, or a final confrontation. And now that she was gone, there was fear that someone would find what she left behind. That her silence wouldn't last. That her revenge might come from beyond the grave. Lucas tried to push away the paranoia, but the anxiety mounted. Every time his phone buzzed, he jumped. Every time someone from Sonny's circle looked at him too long, he wondered if they saw through him. He began replaying every word he had said in the days before Natalia vanished. Had he gone too far? Had he made it too easy for Sonny to act? Was he now considered a risk himself? Lucas had never known what it meant to live in fear, not like this. Not the way Natalia must have felt in her final days. It was poetic justice in the worst possible form. And now, a new crisis was beginning to take shape. Natalia's disappearance wasn't just a private matter anymore. The files she had saved, if they existed, could expose not just Sonny, but Lucas as well. He didn't know who else had seen them, or what was inside them, but he feared they contained conversations. Names, implications. His name. His voice. And if that came to light, his career, his relationships, his reputation, they would all collapse. The regret was no longer internal. It was becoming visible. He found himself distracted during work, unfocused in conversations, withdrawn around family. People noticed. Brooklyn asked him if he was okay. Christina tried to make plans that he always canceled. Even Sam, who had been distant lately, stopped by to ask if something had happened. Lucas said nothing. He couldn't. Because how do you explain that you helped orchestrate the disappearance of your own mother, and now you're not sure if she's dead, or if she left behind a secret that could destroy you? He started making late-night drives, parking near the river, staring at the water as if it held answers. He visited Natalia's old apartment, standing in the hallway like a ghost. Waiting for something, anything, to tell him she was still alive, or at least that she had forgiven him. But there was nothing. Just silence. A silence that grew heavier every day. And then came the news. Someone had broken into a safety deposit box registered under an alias that matched one Natalia had used in the past. No one knew what had been taken. No security cameras. No witnesses. But it confirmed what Lucas had feared. Natalia had planned something. And now, someone else had their hands on it. He didn't know if it was Marco, or Sonny's people. Or someone else entirely. But whatever Natalia had left behind, it was out there. And it was moving. Now, Lucas wasn't just grieving. He was spiraling. He checked behind him constantly. He stopped trusting people. He started locking his bedroom door. Every knock on his office door felt like it could be the moment everything came crashing down. He wasn't just haunted by what he had done. He was being stalked by the possibility that Natalia's revenge had already begun. Because the most terrifying possibility wasn't that Sonny had killed Natalia. It was that Natalia had known he would. And she had planned for it. Now Lucas was left trapped between guilt and dread. Between a memory and a reckoning that hadn't yet arrived but already felt inevitable. The secret he had helped bury was beginning to breathe, and once it surfaced, there would be no way to stop what came next. Natalia had convinced herself of something that was never promised, never spoken, and never real. In her mind, the plane ticket to Belize was more than just a one-way exit. It was a silent vow from Sonny, a romantic escape, a new beginning not for one, but for two. She believed, with every fiber of her being, that Sonny would leave it all behind, his family, his empire, his legacy, and follow her into the unknown, hand in hand, to start over. But this belief wasn't grounded in reality. It was born from longing, nurtured by obsession, and twisted by her growing detachment from the truth. Sonny never said he would join her. He never promised a life together. What he offered was survival, a clean break, a final act of mercy to a woman whose presence had become too volatile to manage. But Natalia's mind transformed that gesture into a love story. And when the illusion shattered, so did her sense of reason. The moment she realized Sonny wasn't on the passenger list, something inside her cracked. The fantasy unraveled. And with it came a tidal wave of betrayal, confusion, and fury. How could he not come? How could he abandon her after everything? In Natalia's mind, she had been loyal, had suffered, had waited. She had endured whispers, judgment, and exile for the hope of a shared rebirth. But now, standing alone in a foreign-bound terminal with no partner, no answers, and no future, she didn't just feel abandoned, she felt deceived. That betrayal didn't lead to closure. It led to delusion. And that delusion began to consume her entirely. Natalia's paranoia took hold like a fever, warping every interaction, every shadow, every silence into a message of conspiracy. She began to believe Sonny had lied to her from the beginning, that the entire plan had been a trap. A cruel game designed to break her spirit. She convinced herself that others had known, Marco, Lucas, even Christina. She imagined them laughing behind closed doors, mocking her hope. Waiting for her to fall apart. And fall apart she did. Her thoughts spiraled. Her sleep fractured. Her movements became erratic, unpredictable. She no longer trusted phones, mirrors, or even her own reflection. She claimed she was being watched, that her hotel room had been entered while she was gone, that something was hidden in her luggage. No one could reach her. Not emotionally. Not logically. She was drowning in the very fantasy she had once believed would save her. This was no longer a case of heartbreak. It was a full-blown psychological rupture. And in the wake of her breakdown, a new kind of danger began to emerge. Natalia wasn't just emotionally unstable, she was acting out. She began calling journalists. She started recording voice notes. She left envelopes in random locations addressed to people who had no idea who she was. She claimed she had proof, proof of Sonny's crimes, of broken promises, of conspiracies that hadn't even happened. She scrawled notes across hotel stationery about offshore accounts, false identities, betrayal. Her words no longer followed logic. Her story changed with every retelling. One moment Sonny had promised her love, the next, he had set her up to be killed. But the constant in every version was obsession. The inability to let go. The refusal to accept that what she had imagined had never existed. What made it all more terrifying was the subtle shift in her behavior. She wasn't just erratic, she was determined. Somewhere in the chaos of her mental unraveling, Natalia had found purpose. A new mission. If Sonny wouldn't love her, he would fear her. If he wouldn't go with her, she would make him regret letting her go. That switch, from delusion to retaliation, was the true point of no return. Because now, Natalia wasn't just a woman betrayed. She was a liability in motion. She had nothing to lose, and she knew too much. She had seen things. Heard things. Things that weren't meant for her. And even if much of what she believed was distorted by paranoia, some fragments were rooted in truth, and that made her unpredictable and dangerous in ways no one could contain. The crisis deepened. Sonny, ever the strategist, had begun to pick up on the growing instability. Natalia wasn't leaving town quietly. She was making noise. She was attracting attention. She was bringing problems back into spaces he had worked years to keep clean. Her presence at Daisy's baptism was only the beginning. Sonny knew she wouldn't stop. She wouldn't walk away. She wouldn't forget. And in her obsession, in her refusal to let go, she was threatening to ignite fires he couldn't afford to fight. The situation was no longer about a woman in love, it was about containment, damage control, and the haunting possibility that Natalia's next move could shatter everything. And in this moment of escalation, the real tragedy revealed itself. Natalia no longer knew what was real. Her perception had blurred so far from reality that every act of kindness felt like manipulation, every word of silence a betrayal, every absence a plan against her. She was alone in a reality no one else could enter, and the loneliness only deepened her resolve. She began to keep a diary, not of the past, but of the future. A future she believed would come, where Sonny would be ruined, exposed, humiliated. A future where she would be vindicated. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This was about rewriting the story. Even if it meant burning the truth to the ground to do it. But the more she fought for that fantasy, the more she slipped from anything that could protect her. She stopped responding to Marco's calls. She screamed at Lucas when he tried to reason with her. She began leaving cryptic messages on Nina's voicemail, begging for a meeting, then threatening to go to the press. The people around her began to whisper, was she dangerous? Was she broken beyond return? And slowly, the town turned. Doors that were once cautiously open now stayed closed. Even those who once sympathized began to distance themselves. Natalia had chosen a path paved in fantasy, obsession, and heartbreak. But what she failed to see was that each step led her further from safety, from redemption, from herself. The belief that Sonny would choose her over everything was never real. But her refusal to let go of that belief is what made the consequences real, tangible, and irreversible. Her delusions were no longer just personal, they had become public, loud, and uncontrollable. And now, with the world watching and the fire she had lit beginning to spread, Natalia was no longer just a woman grieving a love that never was, she had become a symbol of what happens when the line between longing and madness disappears. And in the end, that madness wouldn't just consume her. It would change everything.